Good morning. How are you doing? Kenya's biggest conversation enters the second hour on this 28th day of September 2021. Happy Tuesday, wherever you are tuned in today. So, Ndu, city's PA applicant, Macadero, is asking, you're so good at this traffic thing. Do you actually find yourself sometime talking to your children and telling them, talk to me on SpiceFM KE or text 40127?
Force of habit. One day, if it happens, I'll record and play for you guys.
You see the term that they use.
Children will be confused.
Yes, PM Tarajiwa. That's a nice one, Macadero.
For real.
City, today's proverb.
No one is born great. Great people become great when others are sleeping.
No one is born great.
Nope.
Great people become great when others are sleeping. Okay. There's always somebody who's awake. Even when you're awake.
When others are asleep.
Others are asleep.
Actually, you only need to consider that. The hours we come to work. You know, in the beginning, I used to ask myself, what are these people doing on the road at this hour? And then I realized, but what am I doing on the road at this hour?
This hour.
Yeah, even me, what am I doing here?
Why is everybody awake so early?
I
Why are you awake?
Why am I awake this early? So they must have a good reason. Much as I have a good reason for being awake, but so do they.
Now let's have a conversation about what's been happening in the country. Oh no, in the world. There's COVID-19 as a pandemic. Okay. One of the first things that COVID-19 forced us to do is to, first of all, stay indoors. Well, in Kenya, we didn't stay indoors for long. It was just like one day, and then we were like, where?
Can't do this, man.
But many organizations actually required their people to work from home. Others required their people to take a break from work, which is not even expecting a salary. Let's just call this the laid off. Then the organizations themselves, the businesses, obviously have gone through tough times. Now it's about recovery and seeing, are we building back better, like the global phrase is going, and what is it that we need to do to get there? When you've gotten people who are working from home and now you're requiring them to come back to work, or you're getting people to work from home and you still want them to continue working from home, and then sometimes reporting to work and sometimes not, how do you start leading such people? The guys who have had issues are HR professionals. You see, HR people, and I'm not saying this, with any malice to HR people. HR people like seeing their people. You come in, you clock in, right? And they can see you're at work. Now you are working from home. How do I know you're working?
Because the only way you can be working is if I can see you.
Yeah. I mean,
That's the mindset. That's what I'm saying. It's a mindset.
Now HR people are having to manage people, motivate. You know what is it that HR people do? So you've got to motivate your people. You've got to know, having conversations with people, knowing that the people are doing well. CT, are you okay? That's a conversation that HR personnel usually want to have. So you're having that conversation with somebody on the other side of the screen, and you're asking them, "Are you fine?"
But Eric,
I
mean, how different is it? The times when we used to go to HR offices when you wanted leave. But in this age that we are in, you talk to an HR person on the phone. They send you a form online. You fill it. Digital signature. Leave is granted. You never see the person. You never actually. So long before COVID hit our shows, HR people were already very, very well entrenched in the 21st century, and they're already dealing with this situation that COVID has now forced upon us in great measure.
Yeah, and then they'd come up with those templates where you fill out, how your assessment is going to be done.
Yes.
But they still wanted to have, that one-on-one conversation.
The one-on-ones came in when now the yearly review comes in.
Yes.
When they now want to determine whether you've actually been working, what progress have you made according to this template, what courses have you attended, and all those things. And then, but of course, usually your head of department will have filled in their part, and they'll be there. And then you ask these uncomfortable questions about whether you've been working or not.
Yes.
I doubt if COVID has prevented that, because it's a one-on-one. That is a one-on-one. COVID doesn't prevent the one-on-one. COVID is against groups.
It's a personal touch as well.
Yes. At some point.
And also, when all of you are in the office,
yes,
you're bound to have friction. here and there. So you have the friction, and
is good, Eric.
then you go to your supervisor, and the supervisor in the HR template says, supervisor, and then we shall have a neutral person, HR. Look, Bana, HR, you have to find a way of making yourself relevant. I said, I'm not.
HR doesn't have to make themselves relevant, Eric. HR are relevant.
Of course they are.
Yeah?
They've got to remind you.
By the time the whole process and that department of enterprise evolved until they became human resource.
Yes.
And then they became human resource managers.
Yes.
That landscape changed.
And then it changed. Now it's
Remember,
talent.
it used to be personnel.
Personnel management. Now it's human resource. And then moved to talent and others. Let's bring in HR professionals, and we have a conversation about leading people and businesses beyond the pandemic. Joining us via video link is Kanyingi Kagucia. He's the Chief Operations Officer at Rise and Learn Global, and Emily Kamunde Osoro, who is a director in the same organization, Rise and Learn Global. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
It's good to have you on the show. Asante sana for joining us. First, let's get to understand who is Rise and Learn Global. Then we can start with you, maybe the director, Emily.
Sure. So Rise and Learn is an HR consulting firm. We specialize in impacting lives in different ways. One of those is creating jobs. We also support organizations on the HR processes and strategic business operations. We outsource HR services to organizations that may not be fortunate to have in-house HR. We also provide talent development across organizations. We support HR professionals in this country to develop themselves professionally. And finally, we also provide coaching certification programs across the globe.
From what you've just said, Emily, that's a lot of work that you do. So would you then say that everything you've mentioned, these are the areas you specialize in?
Actually, HR is pretty broad, and to answer your question, yes, we do specialize in mainly those three areas. One, because we found that there is a gap, especially for business owners and small businesses. The first thing you want to do is keep your business running. You may not have the resources of having in-house HR and probably managing your labor. And so that's one of the areas where we come in to let the businesses do what they are good at, and then we bring in the professionalism and the compliance and really supporting them with best practices in HR. And of course, the coaching piece as well has been an area that we have ventured into through also our partners, Ericsson Coaching International. So we develop leaders in this country and beyond to become professional coaches and to be able to use that within the organizations to even become better leaders in whatever area that they specialize in.
You've used a term that I have come across very often, and I have to confess, I don't fully understand it. Professional coaches. You see, I am of that generation when somebody mentioned the word coach, you think sports. Yes, you think football, you think somebody who's running, you think netball, you think volleyball, coach. Boxing, coach. You think of PE, you think of... Now, when you say coach in the field of HR, please explain, what does it mean and what do these people actually do?
That's a great question. Coaches are in the business of bringing out the best in others, helping them discover their potential, helping them become more self-aware, gain confidence, and be able to really achieve their professional and personal goals. So it looks at the whole person. And it's actually a key leadership competency that develops different areas. And so for you to become a professional coach, you actually have to go through a specialized kind of training or certification. And so once you've done that, then you can actually call yourself a professional coach. It's very different from the sports kind of coaching, where you are actually training and showing your players what they need to do to succeed. So the difference is that we believe humans are innately gifted, they are extremely powerful, and they have all the resources that they could use to become what it is that they want to be. So we tap into that potential. We tap into the inner strength of individuals. and really to build their own internal confidence and supporting them, implement their own goals.
So would you then say that parents then are professional coaches?
I think they are some of the best coaches. They haven't been trained, but if they
They actually are trained. The parents are trained. When a child grows up, that's training. And parents often parent in the way they were parented. So they're actually trained. Yes.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. They do have those skills. Come to think of it, yeah.
So essentially, you're saying that I, as a parent, I'm a professional coach.
You're a professional coach.
You just need to come to class and to just close that up.
Kanyingi Kagucia is the Chief Operations Officer at Rise and Land. Kanyingi,
yes, sir.
We have a friend on this show called Philip Kagucia. In fact, my colleagues were asking, is he Philip's brother or father? Or son?
Or cousin?
Probably cousin.
Maybe you never know.
You never know with these things. So, as your organization, you've been dealing with many of your clients during this time of COVID-19. What are some of the experiences that you've seen with organizations having to deal with their staff? Just like you heard us introducing the conversation, in this COVID-19 period, the difficulties that came with it, there is uncertainty, there is a lot of anxiety amongst your staff, even in the organization and among your managers. There is a change of the working culture. Now you're working from home and others are having to come to work. What did HR professionals go through in this difficult period?
It's a good question you ask, and so we keep talking about the new normal, and in many ways it's become cliche. People don't want to keep on hearing about the new normal, but the fact is, it's true, it's here, and it's going to be with us for a while. Now, I had the opening comment about HR wanting to see people and to know that you're working because they can see you. In a way, we've seen the future come to us. So the future came early. You know when we say Christmas come early? Future come early. So HRs have had to deal with things that they were thinking about for the future, and now they're dealing with discussions around job losses. So they're dealing with discussions around cutting down on costs, increased life stresses, and the big one, mental health. So there's an interesting thing. When you sit in the office 8 to 5, there's a way in which you're programmed to work and deliver work and go home. But we've seen two extremes emerge. There are those people, and especially HR, who think, look, when I can't see my people, they are not working.
Yep.
But there's the other extreme where people are overworking themselves. I mean, I wake up from bed, brush my teeth, dress up, and my desk is next to my bed. So I'll sit there from 6:30 or 7. You'll be shocked people are not taking toilet breaks, they're forgetting to eat their food, and then it gets to 5 o'clock and I'm thinking, okay, let me just shut down now, and before you know it, it's 7, 8, 9, 10.
Yep.
You do that over a week, over a month, over a year, then we start getting issues of mental health and breakdown and burnout.
In the office
So that's
setting.
what HR has to deal with.
Right. So if we roll back before COVID, in the office setting where people were having, sitting down or working, whatever, in the office between 8 and 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock, were these things taken into consideration whereby you're saying, all right, get up, have a break, or was it just kind of natural that they would happen? And did we have human resource making sure that these things were happening in the office, or was it kind of ignored? And is this now one of the things that you're saying that maybe COVID has provided an opportunity even for the HR profession to understand that some of these things are absolutely necessary for workers to have? Get up, take a break, take a walk, your mental welfare and all of this. Or was it happening previously?
Spot on. In a sense, whereas there could have been programs that were deliberate before, there are things that were natural. So I get to my desk. At some point, I'll stand up, wake up, and go and have myself a cup of coffee, get some water, go to the gym, have a conversation with my colleagues on my way there and on my way back, and then continue with my work. In a sense, being social beings, sitting among people does something for you. So there could have been deliberate efforts before around team dynamics, around team building and things like that. We overlook these small nuances of what community is. And these are now coming forward. And HR are having to see, okay, before this things work themselves out, but now there has to be a way of bringing people together and ensuring that it's deliberate how we approach this. And mental health is very closely tied to these nuances of community and how we operate as human beings.
Something that I'd like to ask, Emily mentioned the aspect of building capacity. Now, in an era such as the one in which we live, in this COVID era, how exactly do you who are in the HR space deal with building capacity so that people are able, not just to cope with the changes in the workplace, but changes in their own lives? Let me explain why I'm asking the question and the perspective that I am asking from. I'm asking from because if you are an employee and because of COVID, the numbers of people working in the organizations have been cut down, that restructuring means that everything that people previously knew changes. Now, how do you ensure that people are able to understand and to cope and to recover from these changes that have been brought about at a time when they weren't prepared for it? And how does the process that you take them through guarantee that they are able to adjust to these changes?
That's an excellent question, and indeed it's been a challenge for not just HR but business because nobody was prepared for a pandemic. It caught us off guard. And how do you build capacity in such environment? Number one, even before you start thinking about building capacity, you have got to think about connecting with your people. You have got to think about the channels of communication that you're going to use. You have also got to think about change management processes that you bring into the organization because this is a big change. So I think what I've also seen organizations do is to really, really work on that element of connection and making sure that the leadership is at the forefront. They are speaking to their employees often, obviously now using the virtual tools, the collaboration tools that we now have, be it Zoom and Teams, even though right now I must say there's what we call virtual fatigue. But that has been the place we have had to go to, where we have had to organize employees in groups, and even if it comes to, let's say, training, you have got to do that in a virtual environment. And I think what we've discovered is we've all had to pivot and really shift our thinking as far as technology. We were very anti-technology. Well, not everybody, but I think we were in a comfort zone, so to speak. Simple things like just setting up a call like this one, employees thinking, no, I can't touch that, I don't know how to use this. So there has to be also for capacity building in the area of how do they use these tools, how do they embrace the new technology. So that has been one of the areas where HR has had to come in before they even start bringing in the softer skills as part of continuous capacity development within the organization. And I must say it is working. We have had to adapt. In my own experience, I have seen a shift where people who preferred in-person training are now getting comfortable with online because of the flexibility that it provides.
Emily, there are some work sectors that could not afford this business that we're talking about when it came to COVID, and then work from home or, work away from the office kind of thing, because either they were heavily in things like production or heavily in things like, manufacturing. So this thing that we're talking about is a totally different universe for them, right? So when we're looking at changes that would have occurred as a result of COVID in the workspace, and when it comes to human resource, where do these job sectors fall in terms of taking care of them when the whole world is being asked to stay away from one place where they all come together? How then would employers be able to take care of their people, and what considerations would be brought in about for them?
I think you also have to consider it from the point of what business are you in. The service industry has been it's not as difficult because literally you can work from home, you can work from anywhere. But you also have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. For example, in the manufacturing, you've had to have maybe the back office staff. Those ones can easily work from home, and really having to deploy systems to check what it is that they are doing, managing the productivity while they are at home. For the other employees that really need to be on ground, it also has had to be investing more in making sure that the right spacing is there and there is safety, and really just investing more on the health and safety issues, the training, how can employees take care of themselves while they're at work, and as well as also the issue that Kanyingi talked about, taking care of their mental state. Because remember, they're also scared. They're afraid. They're like, will I contract this disease? And am I safe? And it was the same for everyone across the board. So businesses have had to also invest in that space. But one thing I must say is that I think the pandemic has also been a blessing in disguise in a way, because HR for a long time has really been, challenging business that, we need to have flexi time. We need to have a virtual collaboration so people can work from home. There are certain policies that were more difficult to implement before because it was a mindset issue. And business thought, we have to be in the office, we have to see each other. But now we actually realize in some places, productivity is even higher now with people working away from home.
Sure. Kanyingi, a question for you. You had mentioned mental health issues, and I think we saw a proliferation of this, especially with the onset of COVID. But then we cannot run away from the fact that it was a clear and present danger even before COVID. What are practical ways that HR practitioners around the country can deal with something that we've already been told should be declared a national emergency? What are practical ways that you can work with staff today? Because we've seen higher cases of drug and alcohol abuse among people who work in the office, people who don't know how to deal with loss of income or reduction of income and things like that. Ways in which employers can deal with this very serious danger today.
I think one of the things that comes to mind is the fact that when you speak of mental health, especially in our African context, it's something that is sort of a taboo. We don't want to talk about mental health. People equate mental health to sort of going off in the head. I think the most practical of things is, first of all, for all of us to come to the table and say, look, mental health is an issue that we need to deal with, and challenges with mental health is not weakness. So for HRs, creating those spaces where people can feel safe to come in and discuss what is mental health about. I must admit, for a few years, until some years back, this mental health thing was, even to me, more of a Western concept. But the more and more we've gone into the pandemic, the more and more we're seeing the stresses that are coming up. It's becoming apparent that HR and teams around people need to create spaces where people can speak about what it is that they're having to face with. Stuff to do with how to manage themselves both with the pressures of home, pressures of work, and how to open up. I speak today as a man, and I know as men, we do not talk about our issues. It's joked about how we come out and talk about cars and football and these other things. But sitting down and saying, guys, I think I'm having issues, I'm burning out, or I'm having a hard time at work, is something we don't do. So let's go back to the basics. Are people being given space to speak? Is there opportunity for people to surface what it is that they're feeling? Can people be made to understand that how they feel is okay? They are not weak. It is because of the situation they're in. And as humans, we have coping mechanisms together as a community, as individuals to come through. So it's more about creating those conversations, creating the spaces for people to step up and say, I need help. Or for people to put out their hands and say, I can help you. Let me walk this journey with you.
We are having a conversation with Kanyingi Kagucia. He is a Chief Operations Officer at Rise and Learn Global, and Emily Kamunde Osoro, Director at Rise and Learn. They are HR professionals. They'll be telling us about a symposium that they'll be hosting soon to bring together HR professionals to discuss how to lead people and businesses beyond the pandemic. Now, Emily, you are among those who are hosting the East Africa HR Symposium that I'm assuming is bringing together HR professionals from the region to discuss things that need to be done or experiences, to share experiences on what has happened during this time. Just tell us a little bit about it, when it's taking place and how.
Yeah, so the East Africa HR Symposium has been running for the past 3 years. This will be the third edition. Like you said, it brings together professionals and also business leaders from the region. We will be discussing pertinent issues, some of the ones that we had today, and it is taking place on the 6th to the 8th October. It will be both virtual and in person at the White Sands Hotel.
So what are some of the things that you will be discussing that you hope that this symposium will bring out?
Yeah, one of the things is that our keynote speaker, Bridget Hyacinth, who's an international keynote in the matters of HR, will be talking about bringing the human to human resources. How do we bring back the empathy? How do we bring back the softer side of things to the business as well, in how we manage restructuring, in how we manage difficult conversations, performance, health issues that we've talked about today. So how does HR come to the fore? We'll also be looking at business leaders. We'll have conversations on leadership during a time of crisis. We have all been in a crisis during this time. We'll have conversations with CEOs, business leaders, and HR in the room to see how do we need to lead differently, what is it that we need to change. And I think we'll also be very much privileged to have John C. Maxwell as one of the keynote speakers, really talking about the same thing during the conference.
When you say this, actually, I'm intrigued. We say bringing the human back to the human resource. That is sort of some admission by human resource practitioners that they left the human bit of it, and you sort of got sucked into the owners of business who are looking at the bottom line. You know, one would assume, Kanyingi, that HR professionals are actually the advocates for the employees in the workplace, making sure that the employees are taken care of by this institution that they are working in. Are we saying that we've gotten to a point where HR has now become the opposite of the advocate for human resource in the organization? Now you have to discuss to bring back the human aspect.
I think it is not a HR conversation, it's a human conversation. Eric, in all the spheres of our lives, wherever we go, we have taken the humanness out of the human. It's fact. So what you're hearing about from the HR space is just a reflection of the bigger societal issue that we're having to deal with. So when you talk about humanness, there's this word that we use quite often in the African settings, Ubuntu, talking about essential human virtues, compassion and humanity. A closer home was Waswahili wanasema kurudisha utu kwenye watu. There is a sense in which we become so, in our society and especially in business where we operate, so business focused that the employee has moved from the center of things.
Yep.
We're talking about business and profit and top line and bottom line and impact on society. We've forgotten to talk about the employee, and that's why this is an important conversation that we're having. It's not about an admission of HR moving away. It's an admission that, hey, all of us need to come together and ask, what does it mean to be human, number one, and what does it mean to be human at the workplace as we do business and bring value.
Okay, now that we're all together on this particular matter, let me ask this question. The HR practitioners in the workplace, what real power do they have, not only to suggest change or to bring it about, but to ensure that it actually lasts? And that the end user, who is the employee or the person who works in that environment, actually receives these benefits fully. Why do I say this? Because with laying off, there's retrenchment. But before retrenchment and sackings, there is the aspect of ensuring that when someone leaves the job, there's a little cushioning that they may receive, that something like a pension. Aside from this, there's something called health. Apart from this, there's something called valuing the input of this particular personnel so that the reward is commensurate to the effort that they put in. So, does HR have the power to ensure that this balanced playing field exists and that the executive doesn't run roughshod over all these good intentions that HR is supposed to superintend?
Yeah, absolutely. HR has the power. And one of the things I say to HR professionals is they need to have that courage to take their position within the organization and also lead the business and manage their bosses, I would say. Because business doesn't know about HR. We are the experts. So what we bring to the table is that advice, is that consultation in terms of best practices. What is the best for the employees? We are kind of, we play the middle ground. We manage the bottom and we manage, the top. And so yeah.
Emily, if I could just jump in there, and I hear what you're saying, but we have very many very many situations, which is why I really appreciate that you're not just having HR professionals at this symposium, but that you're bringing in CEOs as well, executive members of organizations, so that perhaps they can take on a new and different understanding of what's going on here. Because you talk about HR being the one who's bringing everybody in, but then also remembering that HR is hired by the executive, right? So it's almost as though he who pays the piper calls the tune. So what are we going to focus on? And I think for very many, it would seem as though the powers of HR has been usurped by the executive. So during this symposium now that you have, that is coming up, I think, again, I'm asking, can those who work in these settings, in these situations, know what then their rights and considerations should be at an HR perspective, understanding the situation where in most cases, the executive, the exco, are the ones who call the shots. So we're going to focus on this right now, the bottom line. We're not really focusing on the softer side of things. How then do you ply through these situations as an employee, as an HR practitioner or professional within said organization where, you're just going to fulfill the function as opposed to the need?
I think I want to say that the executive has a big role in the success of the HR leader in the business. And CEOs who have taken it seriously to put the people agenda at the top, you will notice that they are succeeding, not just on their top line, but they are also succeeding overall, because employees, the moment that they feel included, the moment that they feel they are being rewarded for their efforts, then it's a give and take. And HR being at the center of it has got to be in a position where they know how to manage their stakeholders, they know how to manage their board, the executive, and they also need to be able to sell the HR agenda. So it calls for that mindset. It also calls for that skill set from a HR professional angle, and at the same time, the support that's coming from the business. Because HR actually happens to be the, I would say, most powerful office in the sense that you are sitting right to the decision maker. The CEO should do nothing that HR doesn't know. And that's how it should be for successful organizations to thrive, and at the same time to be able to take care of your employees in the best way possible. And those conversations we will be having during the East Africa HR Symposium on how business and HR can partner for even better collaboration and success.
Two questions. What do you do then, or what should one do when the HR is more of a hindrance than a help? That's question number one. And how then do you ensure that HR practitioners are up to speed in their game, that they understand new practices, they are updated on good governance practices, they are updated on good HR practices, and as I said, that they're up to speed in their game? How does your organization help achieve this? But answer the first one. The first question, what do you do with an HR that is more of a hindrance than a help?
You deal with the hindrance, just like the way you deal with another employee. There are also employees, so if they are the obstacle, then they need to be dealt with in the rightful manner, in the rightful process. They should not be a blocker in the organization. And there are those ones I don't dispute. The second one is, how do you bring them up to speed? HR themselves need to be driven. They don't need to sit and wait for the organization to develop them. I think that's the one thing. They have to have the self-drive. They have to be up to speed with the current laws, and not just internally looking, but also they have to be externally focused in terms of what are the changes at the global context, what are the best practices they can bring into the organization, and also sitting with business on a day-to-day to kind of advise them on what needs to change, what needs to shift. I think that has got to be a big one from our strategic approach as far as HR is concerned. And business also has to invest. They have to have a budget for people, the same way they have a budget for every other thing within the business, looking at the top line. The people agenda has got to be within their thinking as far as budgeting is concerned.
You talked about your organization, for instance, Rise and Learn Global. You advise organizations. Some of your clients are corporate organizations themselves that outsource their HR function to you. Now, let's take any case of any of your clients. In a good case scenario, you said you help an organization in recruitment, you help an organization in growing the talent within the organization. Then there's the other softer side of things, like you've talked about. Many organizations will hire people who are taking up their job first or second job. They're still young. They are young men, young women. They're single. During the course of working for this organization, they get families. Their families start to grow. Do you help such people as they navigate through life and they're still working in this organization? For example, understanding that, well, this person's financial needs 3 years ago could have been this, but they have definitely changed because of the circumstances of their life.
That's a great question. And to answer your question, it's a yes, because HR is holistic and the service that we offer is holistic. And I think when I speak, I'm not just speaking about Rise and Learn as the organization, but largely what I've seen in organizations that are forward-looking is that they look at employees from a holistic approach. We are looking at your performance, yes, we are looking at your develop. And as you look at the employee journey, from the time they enter the organization to their growth, to they're also expanding within the family space, as you say, what resources are we providing for them? So looking at it from a benefit point of view, they may not be direct, they could be indirect, creating workplaces and workspaces that are convenient, that work for them. And also advice and kind of soft skills in terms of how do they manage their finances? How can they thrive with the same, financial budget, but now responsibilities are changing. So we provide a holistic service. And also on the other end of the spectrum, what I've seen is that we also support organizations through employee assistance programs. The employee assistance programs help you on the area of, once again, the mental health, managing when you're depressed, when you really can't put it together and you need to speak to somebody, having counselors on board, having people you can trust outside of your organization that you can reach out to, be it also for counseling, be it for financial advice. I've seen organizations invest in that. So we support organizations through those different avenues as far as a holistic support to employees that we manage.
This is also a question for you, Kanyingi, can we look at HR as a profession that is as a practice that is fluid? And I ask this because, again, with the onset of COVID, we saw that organizations started to do things a different way, whether it was work from home, whether it was come home in different shifts. And then they decided that even after COVID leaves us, fingers crossed, knock on wood, that they would continue in this manner. So is it fluid in that sense that we can take on practices which seem to previously not be welcomed, but because of a certain issue like COVID, we find that this is actually working, and then we can now adopt that as a way of doing things? Would HR then, or human resource as a practice, be able to look at it and say, actually, this is something that we can now adopt and apply across, other institutions in the future?
I think so. And to this extent, Emily opened by talking about how HR are employees in themselves. So for their own jobs, this is a new reality. It's a new way of doing things. For the organizations that they assist and support, it's the same thing. A lot of these things that we're discussing today and beyond here have been forced onto organizations. So COVID came in, people had to go remote. We had to think about technologies, about how we reach out to staff, and all things surrounding that. So to answer your question directly, yes, it is fluid to the extent that the situations we are in now are fluid. Just like the CEO's job, the financial officer's job, The radio commentator and presenter's job is fluid based on what we're having to deal with. The HR function has also become quite fluid. And mostly because they sit at the apex of seeing how they can create sort of agile spaces, both physical and virtual, that support their employees. So as opposed to being employees themselves and thinking about themselves only, we have to think about how do they make sure the organization is agile. And that word agile has emerged as a very important word in these times. Agile meaning that organizations are able to turn and pivot and change their operations and the way of doing things to fit into the context of this thing that we are calling the new normal. The cliche word we don't all like, but that is here to stay for quite a while.
All right, so we thank you very much for sharing all those insights from an HR expert perspective. Kanyingi Kagucia, Chief Operations Officer at Rise and Learn Global, and Emily Kamunde Osoro, Director, the same organization. You'll be hosting the East Africa HR Symposium from the 6th to the 8th of August, and it'll be discussing how to lead people and businesses beyond this pandemic. Asanteni sana, and wish you all the best in the symposium.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.